You done now?
Every person in this room has the perfect motive.
Stand back!
For murder.
What do you mean? Murder.
But only one of these suspects is the murderer. Is it the timid Mr. Green?
Why are you screaming? Because I'm frightened of what? Screaming!
Or the militant Colonel Mustard?
If I was the killer, I would kill you next.
Huh?
I said half.
Mrs. White, who helped her husband on his way?
Well, it's a matter of life after death. Now that he's dead, I have a life.
Miss Scarlet, who's helped many men along the way?
Practice makes perfect.
Professor Plum, who's looking for a way?
I'm looking.
Mrs. Peacock?
I have absolutely no idea what we're doing here, but I am determined to enjoy myself.
Or did the butler do it?
No.
Paramount Pictures invite you to an evening of mystery,
Let us out!
murder,
This is getting quite serious.
and madness. In the movie that makes a scene of the crime,
So who did it?
Clue. It's not just a game anymore.
Welcome back to Clue the Movie Podcast. Oh, there it is. My name is Brad Gilmore. That is Jeff Smith reading a great piece of writing there called Back from the Future, a celebration of the greatest time travel story ever told.
So weird. I read this every once in a while I watch minutes of movies, and you caught me.
I caught
me
you.
reading.
I caught you. We're here to talk minute 3 of Clue the Movie. And look, we still have no dialogue here, but we've seen a lot in that 1 minute. Again, we pick up with opening credits. The minute starts. There, you heard me listening to it. The minute starts with us seeing literally the house, the mansion, the Body Manor for the first time.
House.
And it ends with Wadsworth feeding the German shepherds that camp outside of it. The house. Let's talk about it. Last minute, we talked about the gate. The gate is a real place, but the gate is not attached to the house.
No, the house is Hollywood trickery. It is fake. It is a matte painting done by two gentlemen named Bill Taylor and Sid Dutton, who I did sit down with for Who Done It, the Clue documentary. And they were probably the longest interview I did because they had a wealth of information. And they were amazing because they had very, very long careers. They worked for Albert Whitlock for a long time. And if you know anything about matte paintings or Hollywood history, Albert Whitlock was like the man. He did anything that is famous. And then Bill and Sid worked with John Landis, which I asked them, is that how you ended up with Clue? Because John Landis is a producer on Clue. And they said, probably.
Yeah, they were great in your documentary.
They're fun because they were just kind of, Sid Taylor, he has one of the best lines in the movie where I say, in the documentary, where I say, was the house based on anything? Like, did you design it after like a real place? He goes, no, all I needed was some paint and some glass. Like it's that easy. Like then just beautiful painting. We ended up talking about the history. Bill Taylor, who sadly passed away last year. But I could tell he did lectures and classes about what he had done because he went right into teaching mode, and it was very interesting. And the interview was probably over 2 hours, and they're only in the documentary for maybe a minute, but they were very kind, and they walked me around. Bill walked me around his house and showed me he had this amazing art collection, and they had done the paintings for later. The opening shot of Coming to America, where you see Zamunda, is all matte painting, and that's all their work as well. So they were pretty major.
We're looking through again. I'm looking at the matte painting as we're doing this, and I think that's a part of filmmaking that you don't get anymore. I'm sure they do matte painting in some films, but I can't imagine with CGI and the Unreal Engine and things of that nature that you don't really.
It's not paint on glass, I'm sure. It's all on the computer, and they definitely adapted to that at the time. But they had, just a warehouse full of all the paintings, fortunately, that they had worked on. And a few years ago, they had an auction where they were selling off some of their paintings. And what was very cool is I got an email. They remembered me after a couple of years and emailed me and said, "Do you want to? We're about to put the Clue paintings. There's two because they're different angles. We're going to put them up for auction, but do you want to make an offer first?" And I said, "Yes, please." And actually, there's the scene in the documentary where I actually go. You see me go into the warehouse and see it for the first time, and I kind of underplay. It's kind of buried in there that I do walk away with them. I don't really make a big deal about it, but I did, and it's amazing because it's almost like walking away with a member of the cast. Like, I'm taking you home with me. You're part of the movie. Yeah. The Clue House, which doesn't exist, I have it sitting somewhere.
It's incredible that you own that. I mean, yeah. I don't want to ask what you paid for it, but was it reasonable?
No, but it was worth it. No, it was.
Is that a purchase you had explained to the fiance?
Well, to be honest, the fiance had more money than I did, and she paid for it, and I'm still paying her back for it. But fiance also is an associate producer on the movie, so we made that an expense of
the production.
This is your title. Yeah.
Production.
And the way it was argued was, boy, this would be a great scene in the documentary if we go look at the, and then how it would be a terrible scene if we walk away and go, too much. Yeah. So we have to buy it. But I'll tell you, it was the most careful drive I've ever done on the 5 freeway in LA, because it's glass and one of them is cracked just over time. And they, wrapped it up and boxed it, but it was sitting in the back of my SUV, and we're just driving like super slow. That's when you feel every bump on the freeway.
Oh my gosh.
And
Where are they now? Where are they in the house? Do you have them on the wall, or?
I don't have them mounted here in Boston. They're still in California because I didn't want to travel with them. I pressed the luck of going from LA to Orange County with them, and they're still in Orange County.
Okay. So we don't have any plans? We have no plans for them? Or?
No, one day they'll be on a wall, and lights will be on it, and curtains, and the John Morris score will play when you step on something and look at it.
So John Landis had a lot to do with this movie. Kind of conceptualized the story based upon the game. Now, Landis, of course, when you talk about 1980s, the guy's an 80s legend. John Landis is. And he was originally going to direct. So how did Landis become involved with the picture?
I think Deborah Hill went to him just because he was like, the man back then. So it made sense.
And just so people know, I mean, Animal House, Blues Brothers, American Werewolf in London, Trading Places, the Michael Jackson Thriller video, Spies Like Us. I mean, phenomenal. Yeah,
definitely. And Thriller is actually, when Thriller came out, that was the first time as a kid I ever saw behind the scenes. Because they were, this was a time where, you never saw behind the scenes of anything. And when Thriller video came out, it was so expensive that the way they made the money back was to sell VHS copies with a making of Thriller at the end. And that's where they showed Rick Baker doing makeup and showing all this. And I remember seeing that as a kid. I rented that from the mom and pop video store so many times that they finally gave it to me, because I probably paid for it, or my parents had paid for it 50 times over, because whenever we'd go and get something and Thriller, because I'm going to watch that and watch all the makeup. So yeah, John Landis was definitely the man. And then he did like Three Amigos and Coming to America, which we just mentioned.
Coming to America. And he also did Beverly Hills Cop 3. We're just going to throw that out there.
Great in the 80s.
As soon as 1990 hits, or what year is Beverly Hills Cop?
Was about the end, because then
Beverly Hills Cop 3 is 94.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not
Yeah.
great. Not great.
I will tell you something
Also
about
did a couple episodes of Psych, which is a show that I like.
Ike, which
And it
did
has
a
the
Clue
Clue.
episode.
Mhm.
And so going back to the auction, John Landis had been there the day before I'd been there, which I wish I had known because I did not get to interview John Landis. He actually said, or his person said, no, he's working on his own projects. And I wanted to email back and go, yeah, what are those? Because where's he been? But sorry, John Landis, you don't. Come on. I'm just mad. I'm mad. You hurt my feelings. But he had been there the day before, and they were talking about the Coming to America sequel that had just come out, which he had nothing to do with. And I don't know, did you see Coming to America?
I saw Coming to America, unfortunately.
Yeah. Anyway, John Landis wasn't a fan either, apparently. But so he was there because he wanted to get the matte paintings from Zamunda from Coming to America. So John Landis has those paintings somewhere, which is good.
Also, John Landis plays a therapist in a 2015 short film written by, I guess, his son, Max Landis, in a movie called Wrestling Isn't Wrestling, which retells the story of professional wrestler Triple H.
Oh,
It's the last credit he has on IMDb.
And that's your wrestling connection. And then my weird Muppet connection, he plays a part in The Muppets Take Manhattan as an agent that Kermit goes in to pitch a script in disguise, and John Landis throws into the trash, much like he threw my request to be in the Clue documentary into the garbage. So that is something Kermit and I have in common.
So we pull up though to the house. We see Wadsworth. We don't know who he is yet, but obviously he's dressed
prepared. He's got meat for dogs.
So he's familiar with the house. We know this. He's dressed.
He's got a code. And somehow he gets in. He has a key.
He has a key. But I don't know if we. Yeah. He gets in the gate, and he's feeding the dogs. You know, he has steaks ready in the paper sack. So he's familiar with the house. We recognize this. He's got a hat on and the suit. I don't know if since I already know he's the butler, if you're watching this for the first time, would you make that assumption that he's a butler? Or would you
he's got a derby that he never wears again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if he's wearing it when he comes in the door. He just has it when he's in the car and when he feeds the dogs. And then, I mean, we haven't gotten there yet, but he starts checking up on everybody. But yeah, we don't know who he is yet.
Well, yeah, we're not sure, but we know that they're this big mansion.
Yeah.
We know that he's got a really sweet ride. Now, what year is the movie set in? Again?
54.
54, exactly. Okay, 1954. So this is a height, just to kind of give people background, this is like McCarthyism is at its height.
McCarthyism has a lot of play in the background, and we'll hear it on the TV once we get to the kitchen. And J. Edgar Hoover gets mentioned, and communism. We know the line. It's coming up multiple times. So that was Jonathan Lynn. When he was writing the script, he wanted it to kind of set it in the past, and that was the part of U.S. history he knew the best.
So just to give people a reference of what was going on in 1954, so we know. Marilyn Monroe married Joe DiMaggio in 1954. They also tested the hydrogen bomb at the Bikini Island in the Pacific Ocean. Dwight Eisenhower authorized the creation of the Air Force in 1954. I don't know if you knew that. In July.
You made me nervous there because when you said, so 1954, this is what was happening. I thought you were going to go ahead. And
it was also the year
about a year before the famous clock tower.
It was the year before the Hill Valley Storm. Also, this is of course the year that Elvis Presley releases "That's All Right" on Sun Records, and the first issue of Sports Illustrated was published in 1954. So,
and 1 year away from Disneyland in California.
1 year away from Disneyland, which had a horrific opening day
That's right.
Yes, and it was covered on television by Ronnie Reagan.
Reagan.
Yeah. The actor? Yes, the actor.
Who's the vice president?
Jerry Lewis.
Go ahead. I know you had to do it. Yeah.
Yes, I had to. So this kind of what we see in minute 3. So we're trying to put together the narrative. So John Landis had stuff to do with the film, but Jonathan Lynn writes the story. Now, remind me though, wasn't the screenplay kind of passed around? There was a couple of versions of it before. Lynn got a hold of it.
It was all over the place by people that it was difficult to wrap their head around because you really were making a movie about game pieces, which hadn't been done before. So there was they weren't even characters, they were colors.
And the colors of the original game are green, purple. So Professor Plum, Mr. Green, Mrs. White, Miss Scarlet, Colonel Mustard. And,
so those are the names, and they have weapons, and they're in a mansion, and there are rooms with secret passages. But the trick was, why are they there in the first place? Because that's never a part of the game. It's just, you're all there, and there was a Mr. Body in the game. Mm-hmm. And he's called Mr. Body because that's all he is. He's just dead. And so the trick was that people had trouble with was, okay, but why? There were a bunch of different people involved, and some of them they all just kind of quit. And Jonathan Lynn was working on a show in Britain called Yes Minister, which was a political show that was, funny and kind of dry. And I'm guessing Deborah Hill probably was the one that saw that and thought he'd be the guy. And then when John Landis told him his version of the story, which is why John Landis is a story by credit, he said, basically gave him the story up until the butler says, I know who did it. And then he stopped, and John Lynn says, okay, well, who did do it? And he goes, I don't know. That's why I'm here. That's why I need a writer. And so Jonathan Lynn originally went back to his hotel. He basically took the meeting because he had never been on a first class flight before, and he thought that was exciting. So he just was going to go and meet, these interesting people and fly to Hollywood and stay at the Chateau Marmont. And, but then he got there and he's like, I don't know what to do with this. And he actually called his agent and said, I don't know, can I come home? And he said, well, you're there, come up with something. And so he stayed up all night and came up with the idea and came up with all these characters, came up with the fact they were aliases, I think, and why they were all there in the first place, and brought the McCarthyism and brought the time period. And I think that really helps the movie as far as its longevity, because it doesn't feel like an 80s movie at all.
No.
Which is great. Even the people that play, that are the actors that are mainstays of 80s movies don't even look like they did, in other 80s movies. So that's part of the longevity of it.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it had to be it couldn't be set in modern time. It just wouldn't make any sense, because who has these big formal dinner parties in a big mansion? Right. The 50s was right. You could have gone further back even, but the 50s was right.
Well, it's got a lot. It owes a lot to Agatha Christie, 10 Little Indians, and then there were no, and it's basically the same kind of story except it's not everybody being offed one by one. It's the funny thing is the main characters for the most part all stay alive, just become suspects
for the most part.
We'll get to that.
We're going to get to some dialogue here eventually, and I'm going to really enjoy it.
Pretty soon we're going to hear Tim Curry say, is everything ready?
Is everything ready? Is that the first line?
No, he says, I think it's everything's ready, and then you have your instructions.
Yes. I will say.
Take rattle and roll.
Yes. I will say, upon my first viewing of the movie, and we'll end on this because I'll ask you this, because we're about to really get into the weeds of the story. We've talked a lot about how we got here, backgrounds, things of that nature. Did we touch on the score? I don't think we touched on the score. Did we get to that?
No, it's John Morris who did a lot of the score for Mel Brooks movies, probably most famously Young Frankenstein. I'm not sure what the connection is that brought him to Clue, because if it was, a lot of people came from Landis's camp, and if it had been Landis's person, it would have been Elmer Bernstein, because he did all of the Landis movies. But when Landis left Clue, or did decide not to direct Clue, he directed Spies Like Us the same year, and they came out maybe a week apart when they finally came out in theaters. And Spies Like Us was the much bigger hit, and Elmer Bernstein did the score for Spies Like Us. So that's actually something. The documentary, we do talk about the scoring session, but we don't get into how. I don't think Jonathan Lynn remembered how John Morris got there. I think he was just kind of assigned him, but the score is amazing. And it's funny, when I was listening to the first couple minutes, I remembered how the soundtrack was never released back in the day. And I really used to like the score. So I would take my little tape recorder and put it up against the TV and record the movie playing so I could hear the score later. But I would hear the sounds of the tire squealing or the gate opening or the dogs, mainly the tire squealing. There's parts of it where whenever I hear the tires squeal when it goes through the gate, I remember that because it annoyed me as a kid because I just wanted the score. So years later, when La La Land Records put it out, the score, it was like, oh, thank you.
Finally, we have it. The score is great. It's you know, in the 80s, and you know, Fletch does it, Beverly Hills Cop does it. I mean, there's a lot that do kind of the synth score, which is very classic 80s. And I don't think it would have been appropriate for this movie just based upon it being in the 50s, set in the 50s. And I couldn't have heard a synth score.
No, but I will say this. On the soundtrack release, there is a not fully synth, but it's a unused kind of upbeat
really?
kind of thing with the score that is awful.
It just doesn't work, right?
No, I think that was the idea. Maybe they were going to put that over the end credits to kind of bring you back to the 80s, and instead they did, Shake, Rattle, and Roll. Thank goodness. But it's funny to hear that and go, like, it's almost like hey, look what we almost did.
We almost went in the wrong direction.
That was a close one, right? Yeah.
Well,
you almost had the Clue dance mix.
Oh man, they did a Johnny Cash remix album a few years ago, where like they do like all his classic songs, but they remix it for modern times, and like Snoop Dogg is on "I Walk the Line," and there's like a dance mix to "Get Rhythm," and it just none of it works.
Yeah.
None of it works. Just leave.
They waited till after he passed away to do that?
Yes, of course.
Oh,
of course.
Okay.
I mean, not that I actually think that Johnny Cash would have been adverse to doing like hip hop collaboratives, because he was kind of a rebel kind of in nature.
Well, he got pretty experimental at the end when he did Hurt. That was pretty amazing. It's the best version of that song. That's like, talk about Hurt.
That's a tough one to listen to.
Yeah. Well, you feel it. My goodness.
Very good. But look, we're going to now...
This is a podcast where we go from Saturday Night Live to Johnny Cash to
Star Wars. But we find our way back to Clue. And
Back to the Future.
Yes, always Back to the Future. But in the next minute, we're going to see the inside of the house, and we're going to talk. We're going to talk about Tim Curry. I want to talk about Tim Curry in depth and all the characters that we get, because now we're getting into the weeds of the story, guys. Y'all have been on the journey through the credits with us. And now
there's one more credit we haven't seen directed by yet.
We haven't seen the directed by credit, but
or the location and the time frame.
We're almost there.
If it's on TV, where the edited for television would have been in the 80s, when that used to pop up on the screen, when it would be on like ABC or NBC.
Well, we're about to find out what this movie. We're not going to find out what it's about, but we're going to figure out more. In the next minute.
We're going to find out more, everybody. We're going
to find out more. ClueDoc.com. That's Jeff Smith. You can find all the stuff over there. I'm Brad Gilmore. You can find me on all social media at Brad Gilmore. There's the book that I wrote about Back to the Future. And we'll be back with minute four of Clue, the movie.